Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Surface, a podcast for creative deep dives. Today, we are going to have a very special guest who will help us analyze the meaning behind the documentary Anselm by filmmaker Wenders.
Hello, everyone. My name is Eve, and I'm so excited to be here today to share my insight with you all.
Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, of course.
Just for clarity for our listeners today, this film follows Neo-Impressionism Anselm Kiefer as he recalls the story of his life after World War II in Germany. What were your first impressions, Eve?
Yeah, thank you. I was really blown away by the storytelling encapsulating memory and violent history. It really feels like you're taking a walk through the artist's mind in a way. You're constantly hearing whispers from forgotten souls of the Holocaust, to seeing the heaviness and trauma from Germany's past through the ashen paintings and photographs. It really makes for a perfect reflection on the themes present in this documentary.
I thought so too. Wenders does a great job at portraying the emotions we feel upon watching this film. Even if you're not familiar with Kiefer's or contemporary art, the story is so engaging, it resonates with the audience and leads to various questions surrounding it. What did you think about his artwork? Did anything stick out to you at the end?
Absolutely, yeah. For me, the repeated presence of the flowers and the ferns and how they always ended up burnt in the story really stuck with me. It isn't really explained what these elements of beauty represent, but one can imagine the dual meaning of beauty and hope intertwined with pain and grief using the poems from Paul Celan, who is a recurring figure in the story. In his poems, Wolf Bean, he writes, "Lock the door, there are roses in the house. There are 7 roses in the house. In Ukraine, where they murdered my father and mother, what flowers were there? Mother, as I went with your words to Germany, there are murderers there. No one silences the murderers." Sellen's uses of flowers describe life, brings a whole new meaning to Kiefer's artworks, especially his illustration of Poppy in Memory, where molten glass is poured over a singular flower on the floor, highlighting the treatment that Jews faced at the hands of the Nazis. This medium is so different from the traditional ways one creates art. According to Hosper's article, Artistic Creativity, he writes, "In art creation, one must combine certain elements in a new way, such have never yet existed in the world." I believe Kiefer truly achieved peak creativity. Even though many of his artworks expressed the same meaning or had the same materials, he wrote a different part of a large story each time.
Yes, the chosen mediums and hidden metaphors really do bring meaning into Anselm's work. Neo-Expressionism is all about making a bold statement, and his work certainly embodies that using the poems from Paul Celan. I also noticed the overwhelming scale of his pieces that suck you into the creations, and the use of ash and lead to incorporate texture into the works. Bringing in that element of burnt ferns and flowers now has a very strong impact on the viewer who is watching the creation of the paintings take place. Focusing more on his creations, how do you think his life impacted his long-term goal for this art?
That's a great question. As shown in the documentary, Anselm Kiefer loved to prod about heroes and blood-soaked legends of the past, which were the heroes the Nazis admired, which made some people uncomfortable and caused some outrage. Um, Even so, the public accused him of fascism, to which he responded saying, "There's no point staying away from these themes just because the Nazis abused it." Grabbing a quote from Explaining Creativity by Keith Sawyer, creativity is often misunderstood. The best artists reject tradition and convention. I think this quote is relevant to Kiefer's journey since he was disliked in his own country, yet he never stopped doing what he thought was important and loved. As a protest, he photographed himself standing outside famous European monuments doing the Nazi salute to bring up the fact that Germans wanted to forget about the Holocaust instead of addressing it. He says people have told him you can't paint a landscape that tanks have driven through. So that's exactly what he did. Because of those comments, it forever shifted the way Anselm created his works of art, often showcasing the darker elements in the foreground. He gained a lot of popularity in America, who showcased many of his paintings, one of which was called Palette with Wings, representing a Nazi hall, and used a biblical approach to convey that everyone fallen has wings, bringing in a glimmer of hope that the fallen can hopefully be at peace in heaven. The US accepted him as a bold taboo breaker who wasn't afraid to grapple Germany's history.
Yeah, that connection to mythology and literature in his work is really what made him stand out as a great neo-impressionist. Kiefer often referenced figures from German folklore, history, and biblical texts as a way of weaving personal and collective narratives together, which is a sample in neo-impressionism. Anselm says, Art and mythology are different forms of recognition. Myth provides answers to the questions of where we come from, where we are going, what we are. The greatest myths, the greatest myth is the human race itself. Do you think that how we perceive art, whether through a film, in a gallery, etc., affects our understanding of the artist's creative intent?
Oh, definitely. As explored in Anselm, there are these ginormous canvases with slathered black and white paint, with golden ferns burnt to a crisp, towering over the average human being that seem to have no meaning at all. Without any context from the film, this artwork won't really tell a story. However, with the use of dramatic German opera and a narrator whispering the remains of a poem from a Holocaust survivor, the lens is dramatically shifted. In an article by Robert Walzer looking at pictures, he describes how sometimes a piece of art can appear to be nothing, but once you take some time to look at it, it provides deeper meaning, even as far as talking about an artwork he was viewing, saying, I nonetheless took pleasure in it. Suddenly, it began speaking about its life. When Kiefer made those pieces with the ferns, he was literally telling us the life of the Jews with the beautiful golden plants as a metaphor. Eventually, the ferns succumbed to the fire that engulfed them because there was nowhere to go and nowhere to escape.
Yeah, absolutely. Without the context to shape our views, the artwork could tell many stories, depending on how the person interprets it. It often even seems odd to some, or someone could argue that it might not have a meaning at all. That's it, that it's just abstract art. I know for me, if I went to view these pieces, I wouldn't be able to pinpoint a specific theme surrounding them. Now, I want to discuss the ways this documentary moves, especially slow. How do you think the pace has anything to do with how we take in the information displayed as an audience?
Another great question. Yeah. I know for some movies or films, such as this documentary, that move at a slower pace would often solicit boredom and the need to watch it at a faster pace or to simply avoid it altogether. Wim Wenders definitely uses the aspect of time to his advantage, purposefully making it so we are solemn and quiet while listening. So the few words that are actually spoken have a greater impact. It is also made so that the viewers can take a moment to linger on Kiefer's art, inviting contemplation. The film explores complex themes like memory, trauma, and the weight of history, which are topics that require reflection and thought. So pieces like these are often called slow consumables, which highlight the importance of slowness to communicate a political position. In the essay on the creation of art by Monroe Beardsley, he distinguishes two theories: the propulsive theory, which the artist begins with very little and over time creates a final piece, and the finalistic theory, where the artist knows what he wants all along, he just develops on it, working towards the end goal. I believe that Anselm has always had a goal in his mind before starting a new piece, and would then show his creative process on the canvas to tell its own story.
Yeah, even though Anselm is a slow consumable film, we got to the end of it.
Yeah, we did. Before the end of this episode, are there any last questions you would like to ask me about this film?
Sure. What is one takeaway from this documentary that you would like to share with others?
Oh, honestly, referring back to the part where Anselm received criticism for talking about a really big issue is something I believe is important to talk about. To quote what he said again, there's no point staying away from these themes just because the Nazis abused it. I think it's really harmful to society when people don't address their wrongdoings. They simply tend to forget that it ever happened. People search for the lightness and shy away from the burdens. They don't want to look at the abyss. What Anselm wanted to do was he wanted to hold up practically like a big mirror to those who wanted to forget about the Holocaust and to say, look at our history. You can't erase it, so don't forget about it.
All right, with that, our episode ends. Thank you so much, Eve, for being on our podcast today, and thank you, viewers, for listening in. Stay tuned next week where we discuss Art on My Mind by Bell Hooks.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure to discuss Anselm with you. Bye.